wonder if you're going to be able to hear me if I put the microphone like this. Does this work?
Yes.
Everybody can hear me? Good. I am so glad to have this opportunity to tell you all a bit about Hayes. Then, whoops, and now. So how many of you have heard of Hayes before today? Good, good, good. How many of you have visited there? Good, some of you have. Excellent. The good news is that any and all of you can visit there anytime. It is nearby, it's right here in this county, and it belongs to all of us. It is a state historic site, and so a public park that we can all enjoy. But it was not always so. Hayes Farm, also known as Hayes Plantation, was a plantation. It's located at the edge of Edenton, just across Little Wooden Bridge from the park on our waterfront. That bridge is called Johnston's Bridge because Mr. James Cathcart Johnston built it to connect his lands to town. Before that, people got back and forth across Queen Anne Creek by boat. James Cathcart Johnston's father, Mr. Samuel Johnston, was an early governor of North Carolina. How many of you know that Edenton was the first capital of North Carolina? Good, almost everybody, very important. Governor Johnston served a little later than that. He bought what we now know as Hayes in 1765 and named it for the place in England that his family came from. He lived in the house at the top of the rise that you get to when you cross the bridge from Edenton. But in 1815, or about then, he decided to build himself a new house and got started on a project that would take several years. He died before it was done, and his son, James Cathcart Johnston, continued construction. He decided it would be a good idea to hire a famous English architect called William Nichols to make the house grander. How many of you know what grander means? Yeah, good. Hayes became quite grand. By 1860, Johnston owned 1,374 acres at Hayes and enslaved 130 people at Hayes. Those people did the work of farming the land, plowing with mules and horses and oxen, sowing seeds by hand, hoeing out the weeds, and harvesting the crops. Vast quantities of grain and other produce were grown for export and contributed to the robust economy of our county. The food that the Johnston family and their enslaved servants ate was grown there too. Processing all this produce took a lot of labor. Milking the cows, killing the hogs, salting the pork, grinding the corn, canning the tomatoes, pickling the cucumbers, etc. All that was done by enslaved people too. James Cathcart Johnston and several of his relatives lived in the grand Palladian-style house that Mr. Nichols designed for him. But he had neither wife nor children at Hayes. His own family lived elsewhere. Johnston traveled a lot to take care of his various enterprises and business interests, and travel in those days, of course, was quite different from now. It was slower, for one thing. Hertford was a day's travel away, and usually Mr. Johnston's first stop when he was going anywhere. He would always stay at the Eagle Tavern, which was owned by his friend Edward Wood Sr. And it was run by Edie Wood, who was a free woman of color. Edie had been born enslaved by Edward Wood's father and was probably his daughter, so she and Edward were half siblings. James Cathcart Johnston and Edie developed a relationship and had a family together. They had 4 daughters, Mary, Caroline, Louisa, and Annie. And those 4 daughters lived with their mother. In 1833, Edie and their daughters moved to Philadelphia, where James and Edie thought they would be safer and more comfortable than in the vengeful and racist atmosphere of Northeast North Carolina. Mr. Johnston provided for his family and probably saw them whenever he went north. Though he was a large enslaver, Mr. Johnston was also a member of an abolitionist society, and he considered freeing all his slaves decades before the Civil War. But that is not what he decided to do. He worried that the farm could not be successful without the labor of those enslaved. And as he prepared his will, he was advised that the most compassionate thing to do was to leave his enslaved to another enslaver whom he trusted to be kind. This is an example of what we continue to understand as white supremacy. Finally, he decided to leave Hayes to his friend Edward Wood Jr., who was himself a successful farmer of several large properties and who had lately been working for Johnston as manager at Hayes. Edward Wood Jr. was Edie Wood's nephew. So the property, though sort of in the family, did not go down in the Johnston family with his children. Rather, it went down in the Wood family, who lived there and for generations and continued to operate the farm until just about a year ago, when it was bought by the state of North Carolina and made a state historic site for all of us to enjoy and learn from. Now, when you go to visit Hayes, you will see the grand house, and you can wander as you please over nearly 200 acres. You'll notice that there are many smaller buildings around the big house. Those include a smokehouse and a dairy, which is what they had instead of a refrigerator in those days, and a bathhouse and a stable and a carriage house, a couple of small homes. Those houses were originally the dwellings of enslaved house servants. And other servants, the enslaved cooks, would have slept in an apartment above the kitchen. Mr. Johnston's butler would have slept in the attic above his office. You'll notice when you visit that the space where the enslaved lived was much smaller and simpler than where the Johnstons and then the Woods lived. The work that the enslaved did was intense. It was often very hard physically, and it was constant. There was always more to do. Besides working for others, the enslaved had to work pretty hard to keep their own families fed and clothed, including making their own shoes and hats. At Hayes, there was, however, some time for leisure, and people were able to use their creative talents as an outlet and sometimes to earn extra money. Richard Cox, for instance, worked as the butler at Hayes for the Wood family. He was also quite artistic. He would make interesting carved wooden toys that the Wood children enjoyed, and he would draw and paint. The Wood children even bought his drawings with their pocket money. He knew they would always buy a picture of their fine home, and he drew several of them, which still exist today. And you can see one at Hayes, and you can see one at my house when you come to visit. There are many stories to be told of life at Hayes through the ages. There are stories to tell of what life was like in the big house, the famous people who visited there, the powerful decision makers who lived there and who came through. There's stories to tell of the famous people who were buried in the pretty little fenced cemetery that's over there. And there are stories to tell of what we cannot see today, such as the probably much larger slave cemetery that no one knows where to find yet. While books have been written about the owners of Hayes and their impact on our community, little has been written about the lives of the people who worked for them. Those stories may be the most important ones for Hayes to concentrate on telling, because it is those stories that have been forgotten, not only at Hayes, but also in so many other seats of power. The donations that y'all have made will be used by the people who manage Hayes to help tell the story of the place by maintaining the buildings and grounds and by engaging historians and other researchers. I hope that you will visit Hayes. It is free to go there. And I hope you'll tell the people you meet there, tell them what you most want to know. That will also help them tell the story. Thank you so much for your contribution.